When working with data, it's often necessary to aggregate it. For example, let's say you want to calculate the average income by race or ethnicity within your sample. Or let's say you want to calculate the percentage of people that have a college degree within your sample by the city that they live in. These are examples where you would take data and then you would calculate some summary statistic per level of a different variable. In the examples I gave, per race or ethnicity category or per city. In this video, I'll show you how to do that within R. So here's a visual example of what we're talking about when we say aggregating data. In this upper left corner here, you have one row per person in your sample. You can see that you have ID, name, their income, their credit score, and their satisfaction score. And what we want to do is, for example, calculate some averages or aggregate statistics here, summary statistics for credit score and satisfaction score for each level of income in the data, so that we might produce a table like this. And here are a few reasons that you will need to aggregate data. You'll need to aggregate data if you want to create summary tables, if you want to create graphs of those summary statistics. You'll often do this to compare groups, and sometimes you need to create variables. And in this video, we'll be using R version 4.1.2 and the dplyr package version 1.0.0, and I'll have a link to the files for this so that you can replicate it on your machine. So we start out by reading the customer data and putting it into this object called customer A data. And we can see up here that there are 20 rows and 193 variables. Then I will load the dplyr package using this library function. So the first thing I need to do is I need to take this customer A data, and we'll peek at it really quickly. We can see that it's got some of the same columns as I showed in the PowerPoint. And we're going to be interested in just a few of these here. And so we take this data frame called customer A data, and we use this function called group_by in the dplyr package. And the arguments that this function takes is the data frame, as well as the variable or variables that you want to group the data by to be able to calculate these summary statistics, or to be able to aggregate the data. And so what we'll do here is, because this customer A data has this column called income, and that's what we want to produce aggregate data by for each level of income, we'll use this income variable name right here. Now you could also add a few more names, and what that would do is it would slice up the data by the combination of those. So for each unique combination, it will perform whatever aggregation that you want it to do. But the first step is to group by, and we're only grouping by income in this example. I'll run this line and put it in this new object name called aggregate by income. And what this is doing is it's creating a feature within this object that specifies that you're going to be using income to aggregate. Then the next step is to take that same object and use that in this function from dplyr called summarize. So we'll say dplyr : summarize, indicating that we want to use the summarize function for within the dplyr package. We will give it this object that we created up here that contains this additional piece of information about the fact that you're grouping by income. And I'll show you what that looks like. I'll use the str function. You'll see here at the bottom of this, there's a list, and it says income, and it has the different levels of income in the data set. And then this other piece here that says rows, and it's specifying in this data frame which rows correspond to this first level for income greater than $45,000. So this sort of metadata is what this summarize function will use to say, oh, okay, I know which rows need to be grouped together when I'm calculating these statistics. So getting back to this function summarize, we're giving it this object that has that grouping attribute in there. And then what we want to do is we need to tell this function what new variables we want to create. So we will create a new variable called number of customers, and that will be equal to, then I'm going to use this function from dplyr called in, what this will do is it will just count the number of rows. And the next thing we're going to do is to create this new column called average credit score. We will use the mean function, and so within that mean function we'll use the credit score column so that it will calculate the mean or average of the credit score column for each level of income. And because there's missing data, we also need to specify this argument within the mean function called na.rm equals true, telling R to remove any missing values from each level of income when calculating the mean or the average. The last column that we're going to create is going to be this proportion satisfied column, and that will be equal to, and I'm going to unpack this a little bit. We'll start by what I put inside the mean function. So we're going to calculate a mean of something, but what we're doing here is we're saying take the satisfaction score column, which is this here, and that's an integer. See that the first few values are 3, 8, 5, 8, 0, etc. And we're going to say for each satisfaction score that's greater than or equal to 9. And what R will do is that is a logical statement that's saying for each row is the satisfaction score greater than or equal to 9. So then R internally is going true or false. And so in instances where it's true, R also treats trues or falses as ones or zeros respectively. And so we can take advantage of this fact that R will look at this and think true or false, and that true or false is synonymous with 1 or 0. And so we can put this logical statement in here and then calculate a mean or average of that. So now imagine that you have a 1 or 0 for each row based on the condition of whether or not that satisfaction score was greater than or equal to 9. And then we're taking the mean of that. So that ends up being a proportion. And so we're calling that proportion satisfied. Now, if I just run this here without running it and saving it as the new aggregate by income object, if I run that, we'll see that this is what we get. So we get a data frame, and in this case, it's actually called the Tibble object, but it's basically a data frame, and it has 5 rows, 1 row for each income level. And then we have number of customers, which is what we specified here. We have average credit score, and then we have proportion satisfied for each of those rows. Now if I run the whole thing, that's what our new aggregate by income object looks like here. And we can take that and then save it out as a table in a Word document or whatever we want to do after this fact, but this is how we create it. I hope this video was helpful. If you want to learn more about how to use R for your data analysis needs, please subscribe.